18F is a good example of a show that I like because it does one thing really good. Outside of that, I'm not really sure if I should call the show good or bad, but it's probably the most interesting show I'm watching this season. The animation is really nothing to write home about, and the characters feel like more a means to an end. Like, the main character feels even more bland than most harem protagonists, and that's kind of saying something. His supposed sister feels almost non-existent, with the only character that actually gives much feeling being the researcher or scientist or professor or whatever you want to call him, the cat person. But that's not really where the meat of the show lies, in my opinion. What I really like is how they tell the stories of these witches, because each one is from a different perspective and is very different. But what really makes this all come together is how every episode is written by a different director. The one thing the series really does right is capturing the inconsistency of a dream. Every single episode feels like it has nothing to do with the last one, and not just because it's episodic. I mean, like, the visual direction is different. It feels like the animation is different for some of them, but for the most part, that's probably wrong, aside from one in particular, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Everyone has different pacing, they have a different tone. It feels like none of these episodes are connected, aside from the characters who are venturing into the dreams. And I feel like that's the best way of capturing a dream, because no two people dream the same way as each other. For an example, inside the first episode, it feels like a fever dream. You're thrown right into it, you don't really know what's going on since it's the first episode. There's lots of colors, the camera angles, and everything that's taken, like picture-wise, is just really weird. And it's supposed to show a spastic dream, which you can often have while you're sleeping, and like you basically have no idea what's going on yourself. While inside the second episode, the tone gets surprisingly dark, with lots of murder, lots of, like, you actually seeing people being killed. While the first episode entirely takes place with blank colors for the backgrounds and no real defining features, the second episode only has two set pieces that are a lot more specific, but take up the entire dream part of the episode. One being a long road with nothing on it besides the people in the dream, while the other one being the empty, bloody room that the sleeping girl's parents and sister were killed in. And I really like the dark tone of the episode just because of how much it contrasts with the first episode. And then the third episode does it again. The entire dream takes place inside of an empty city, because the girl who is inside the coma for this episode is here because she has an illness that doesn't allow her to live a normal life. And that's what she's dreaming, is just being a normal person, despite there not being really stuff around her to be normal, to do normal things with. And a lot of that episode is her trying to confess her feelings to the main character before it's too late, which would be kind of spoilery if I explain why it would be too late. But while the first episode feels very fast-pacing and very light-toned, the second episode gets extremely dark and gritty, while the third episode is a mixture of sad and happy. And I just really like that none of these meld with each other that closely. And I don't feel like that's a mistake. Like, you could often say that that's a mistake in anime for whenever the tones of the episodes don't match, but it feels very intentional here. And it kind of has to be with how the directors change for each episode. And I particularly like for that third episode, whenever she goes to that festival, that it's the only time in the dream where it's very abstract. You see monsters are the ones giving out the prizes, or like at all of the booths. And it's very different from how all of the buildings and the city looks normal. And I was thinking that's because she's never been to a festival before, so she has to dream what it's like, and she has no frame of reference. And then they pointed out a little bit later, after that happened, that yes, she had never been to a festival before. And I really like this take on dreams that this show gives. Now, to be honest, even with the show doing this one thing very well, I understand if the animation and the characters and all can turn you off of this show. So even if those first 3 episodes weren't able to pull you in, I still recommend watching episode 7. Even just skipping 5 through 6, I still think that those are fine episodes, but they're very not much different from 1 through 3. While episode 7 feels like it was drawn to be a children's storybook and really stands out compared to all of the other episodes. You can tell how much effort they put into that episode, and I really appreciate how it turned out. With the stunning take of The Wizard of Oz, and then melding with other children's stories which, like, you might not know, like the whole Chinese 5 proverbs or whatever they talked about in that episode, and just how abstract everything was, and how, I don't know, like, even if you feel like the show doesn't have that good animation, the animation in this episode just really caught me off guard, and I think it's worth watching. Even if you don't watch any other episode from the series but the first episode, and you only just need that one to get to know the characters, I recommend watching that 7th episode. Now, as I was kind of saying before, I realize that this show won't really be for everyone. I honestly appreciate all of the dream world aspects which they've done, and how much effort they've taken in the direction of this series, but I entirely understand if the writing and animation can turn you off from it. I still appreciate the show for what it is, but I'm sure that many of you will probably differ from my opinion there. Either way, I feel like the show is worth giving a shot if you feel like you may be interested in seeing how direction can really make a show. It reminds me a lot of Baccano, honestly. I think that Baccano is leagues better, but I was thinking about it, and if Baccano did not have the direction that it did, with the time going back and forth, if it just played everything straight from beginning to end, it honestly wouldn't be that special of a series. And I'm not really trying to knock Baccano because I think it's great, but the direction is what made that series. And while it's not to that extent, it's the same thing that makes 18F what it is. And I think that is worth checking out for that reason alone. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a good day. Peace.